Alright, good morning. This video is about relative extrema. Extrema is just another word for maximum and minimum. Okay. So, a relative maximum is just the highest point in a specific area. So, on this graph, you see you have this polynomial function. Okay, it has a relative maximum right here because this is the highest point in that area. And then it has another relative maximum here because this is the highest point in the area. All right, and even though this graph will continue to go up and up forever, it does not matter. We just want for that specific area. All right, and then the same works for relative minimums. So the relative minimum is the lowest point in the area. So we have two relative minimums, one here at 0, -1. And then you go along the graph some more, and then you have another relative minimum right here at 3 and -2. Okay, so relative minimum is the lowest point in the area. A relative maximum is the highest point in the area. So if you still don't understand, think of it like this. If we took everybody in our class and lined them up, and we were looking for the tallest person in our class, the tallest person in our class would be the relative maximum because they're just the tallest person in that area. But if you took that person and said, gather up and see who's the tallest in the school, it may be someone taller than him. So then that person would be the relative maximum. So it just depends on what area you're in and what's around you. All right, so that is pretty much the concept. Now, the way that you describe it is you say, for this function, let's call this function g of x. Okay, we would say that g, right, maximum. So g has a relative max of 2, okay, of 2 at x equals -3. So you see how we're describing the max using the y coordinate instead of the x, because the max is talking about the height. All right, so we use 2. G has a relative max of 2 at x equals -3. All right, let's do the other one. So G has a relative max of 1 at x equals 2. And that's pretty much it. All right, let's do the minimum. Okay. So we would call this relative minimum, we would say that, let's call this function h of x. So we would say that h has a relative minimum of -1 at x equals 0. And then to do the other one, we would say h has a relative minimum of -2 at x equals 3. All right, so here's our U-try. I want you guys to find the relative maximum and the relative minimum, and then write a statement like we did for the maximum and minimum on our last page. Let's call this function f of x. So I'm going to pause the video, come back. All right, so let's go over the U-try. So we have this polynomial function. Okay, this function, we're going to call it f of x, and it has several relative maximum and minimum. So we count 1, 2, 3 relative maximums, and then 1, 2 relative minimums. Alright, so we can say that f has a relative maximum of 2 at x equals negative 5. That would be this one. Then f has a relative maximum of 4 at x equals 0. That one. Then f has a relative maximum of 2 at 4, where at x equals 4. That would be this one. Alright, and then the relative minimum, f has a relative minimum of negative 3 at x equals negative 3. Right here. And then f has a relative minimum of 0 at x equals 2. Right here. Alright, so if you have any questions, you can ask me or post them on Edmodo, and wait for another video.